One of the things that I found lacking in working with different sales coaches and trainers was the acknowledgement of the courage it took to actually show up and invite people to work with me. And so in today's episode, I'm going to introduce a resource that I created that I feel really is invaluable to equipping clients with the tools necessary to show up powerfully, confidently, and present on their sales calls. And I can't wait to introduce that resource to you. I'm Dr. Nadia, founder and CEO of the Doing An Agency and host of the Straight Talk About Sales podcast. And I'm excited for you to tune into today's episode because, oh my goodness, we cover so much as it relates to courage, but also how to have powerful sales conversations that convert, that would help you be more confident on your next sales call. Join us and tune in to this conversation. Over the past couple of episodes, I've done a lot of talking around no, connection, really, what that looks like around mindset and having the conversation, or even having the courage to go into a conversation. And so today I want to, one, introduce a new resource, but then also talk about structuring the conversation. And then some of the things that I share with clients that really help them to move forward in having sales conversations to not only help them prepare, because I do believe preparedness is very important, but it also helps to build their confidence. And one of the reasons why I really believe strongly in this particular resource, and a couple of things that I'm going to share with you in today's episode, is that I believe one of the biggest gifts that we give our prospects and future clients is the gift of presence. And with so many things going on in today's world, things that often keep people distracted, it's really important that we're able to show up in these conversations and be fully present. And sometimes that can be a challenge. There are a lot of things going on, but what I don't want you to do when you go into a sales conversation, and which is why I want you to be equipped with these different tools and resources, is I don't want you to go into a conversation and you're so in your head because you're worried about what the person that you're talking to is going to say. And I remember those days because would sometimes go into a conversation and I am so nervous about, well, what if they ask me something I don't know the answer to? Or what about this? And am I prepared enough? Am I ready? And it really got in the way of me being able to be fully present to that individual in front of me that I was speaking with. And whether they knew it consciously or not, they knew that something was amiss. And so it's those little things that can really make a huge difference in being able to truly connect with a prospect future client. And we really want to make that connection and really start to build and nurture that particular relationship, particularly when it's a great fit, and it's someone that we've been there, someone you're excited to work with. So the first thing that I want to share with you really quickly is just this resource that I created, the Courage Diary. And I want to tell you a little bit first around why I created this resource. And it's because, in my experience, I found that many sales trainers, coaches that I come across on my journey to being able to be more proficient and effective in sales really focused a lot on providing particular skills. But the one part I really did not like was the debrief after, right? So you have the courage to get on the call with a prospect. You do all the things you were told to do, and you try to remember all the things. Did I say this? Did I do this? Did I remember this? And then after the call, you then go and debrief with your coach or your trainer, right? And or your manager. And one of the things that they often ask, obviously, is, well, did you close the sale? I was like, I don't know. So if you close the sale, it's like, yes, ring the bell, But if you didn't close the sale, what happens? And what that would often look like would be, okay, well, let's go through and let's look at all the things that you could improve. And they look at, what are the things that you can make better, right? And while that is important, it's definitely important. The one thing I found for me that was missing was the acknowledgement that whether or not that person chose to invest in whatever it was I had to offer in that moment, um, whether or not they made that decision in that moment, it didn't negate the fact that I had the courage to show up and do my part. So one of the things that in sales that we sometimes forget is that we cannot force clients to become clients or prospects to become clients. There are things that we can do to influence. Obviously, there are things that people can do to manipulate and try to, work a particular outcome. But ultimately, that decision lies solely in the hands of the person who is buying from us. And so, in that, what is important to remember, and this is really important because a lot of times clients that I get to work with, they're like, I don't want to do all those things. I don't want to be manipulative. I don't want to feel like I have to pressure people. That's not my jam, right? Those are my peeps. And it's like, that good, because truth of the matter is it's out of your hands anyway, right? Your job is to show up, be prepared, be present, ask questions, be interested, be a solution provider, be an ally, all those things. But ultimately, that's not your decision, right? It's not your decision. And you also, in that conversation, you get to make a decision around, are we a good fit? Do we have a solution? Is it a right solution? Is it a right time based on what you know about that particular prospect? Do we want to work with them, right? And then do we extend the invitation? So that is your role. That's your part in it, right? That's what you get to influence. But ultimately, the buyer, your prospect, they get to decide when and how. And so there are all kinds of things, and we're not even going to go there, that we may do to try to influence that, to try to get people to make a decision sooner, all those great things. But ultimately, that's how it works, right? And so coming back to just, having a sales conversation, I created a courage diary because I wanted a tool for salespeople to have that they could, one, it's a practical tool. So it's a tracker. Like, it's obviously not as cool as using your online trackers, which are great and I definitely recommend, but it's also just a practical tool that tracks the conversation. So you taking notes, it has contact information, where the lead came from. It may not be your first call, it could be a follow-up. What questions did they ask? Which solution did you recommend? And a very important part to me that we added in this was, how did you feel after the call? What emotions came up for you? Because I find that sometimes our emotions get entangled in the sales conversations and they can derail them. But it's important that we acknowledge and find out what they are and what may have caused them to come up in the first place so that we know how and what to even address, right? So it's a great tool. It has different quotes throughout, and it's space for 100 conversations. So a lot of clients have used this in their 30-day 100 no's challenges. So like I said, great resource. I love it. This is probably, I don't know, the third or fourth iteration. Like, it's just come full circle over time. And I was really excited, really proud of this resource to help clients have those conversations, because it's just one of those tools that just helps you to get better. So I wanted to share that. And so within this particular resource, you will find what I call your conversation guide outline. So many times we hear about sales scripts and why you should have a script. And a lot of people are, they don't like scripts. I was one of those people. I was like, and there's a reason why. Here's the thing though, I will acknowledge that when I got my mind right and I was really focused on Nadia, you have to learn how to sell, ma'am. I started with a script. I will say that. Here are the things though that I found that I just naturally did with the script, and which is why I flipped it on its head and we created the conversation guide that we provide to our clients, is that I would naturally see the script that, my coach at the time provided to me. And I was like, this is great. But I went through said script and I was like, I would never say this way. I would never say that. I would not ask that question, right? And I revised said script to fit me. Now, I just thought everybody on the team did that. Like, I was like, I don't know. Like, this is what you do. Like, you go and you look at the script and you're like, that was not the case. I later found out. And so with that, I created the conversation guide. And well, let me share this thought first. I'm so excited. One, part of the reason why I wasn't a fan of scripts is because I felt like a script just put me in a box. And it did not allow me to really flow the way I needed to flow, which was why I, tore the script apart and just took my little pen to it. I don't know if it was red, and made it my own. And also, if I was too focused on the script, I wasn't present. The script sometimes made me feel like that, it was too rigid in many instances where I just, I had to say this and then this, but what if somebody said this and we skipped these 8 questions, right? So it didn't quite flow. I learned how to make it fit me, which was why I was like, oh, wait, this isn't a script in the sense of a script, as when they were often presented. This is what Nadia would call a conversation guide. And it's a guide because it's helping me stay focused, but I'm having a conversation and it allows me to still be present to the person in front of me. It allows me the flexibility to flow as they flow. So if they answer, said question 5 on my list, well, guess what? I get to skip it and move on. But it provides me with the structure so I know how to lead the conversation, and it makes sure that I cover the things that I need to cover in order to really present a solution to a prospect to see and extend the invitation, right? To actually, extend the invite to make a sale, right? So that's what the conversation guide does. In the courage diary, there is a flow, and you just adjust the flow based on your particular offer. So it shows you all the parts of the conversation guide, and it enables you to then be able to go and do that. So that is one of the cool things about it, and one of the reasons why I love this particular resource. The other thing, though, that I have found as you think about all the pieces when it comes to sales is something that many times people don't acknowledge, but I hear it a lot. And that is belief. You have to believe in what it is that you're selling. At least the people that I get to work with do, right? And so in that, the first person that you get to sell is you. You have to have that belief. So being able to go through the different pieces of that conversation guide and being so clear on how you best serve your clients and the results that they get and how they're different and transformed as a result of working with you, man, priceless. So you have to make sure that as you're going through this, that you understand those different elements. Like I said, that outline is definitely here in the courage diary. So then it's like, okay, Dr. Nadi, because then, all these questions often come rapid succession. Like, wait a second, whoa. Once I get my mind and I get the courage up to even start having these conversations, it's like, okay, what do I say? Now, I don't have time in this podcast episode to train you on all the things. But I will say this. One, I want you to go into the conversation, one, understanding that you're going into this conversation as a leader, but also as a solution provider. Like that totally starts to shift the narrative in our heads. you're also going in like it's almost like a mutual interview. They're interviewing obviously to see is this something or someone I want to work with to solve a particular problem or achieve a particular outcome. But you're also doing the same thing. Is this someone I want to work with? Is this person going to be a great fit for me and or our team? Like, are they going to be difficult to work with? Like, what does that look like? And also, what is the best solution? Like, I may have come into a conversation with a particular solution in mind based on a limited information I may have going into a sales conversation. However, during the question part, when you're asking questions about, what's going on and really understanding what it is that they desire and how you may best be able to serve, you may then realize that what you originally thought was the right solution isn't. Now, I have to add this in here. Just because it's a different solution doesn't mean the solution is less expensive. Because sometimes we have that story that people aren't or won't buy because of whatever the investment is, whatever the number is. That's not always the case. And so it's really important that we show up with the heart of I am going to present the best solution based on the information that I have. And then we can obviously have a conversation about whether or not that makes sense and why or why not. And so I think it's really important that you stay open in the conversation. And there is that level of flexibility because for many companies and many of us, there's an ability to serve people in multiple ways. So while we try to keep it refined, we obviously also have some different solutions in mind and being able to present those when we go in, right? Into a conversation and being able to present those solutions. And there's nothing wrong with being honest, right? Like I know originally when we came into this conversation, we thought of X. So, for example, I recently shared with my newsletter list, I was like, hey, I have some time open on my calendar right now, right? And I would love if you're open, we could do a private strategic sales intensive, half day, all day, totally up to you, right? Let's talk about it. Here's the thing though, you go into the conversation, they schedule a call because of how I position that invitation to schedule the call. We're all thinking, hey, this is what we're going to go in and talk about. However, in the conversation, you realize that's all well and good. However, I need a solution where not only do we map out sales strategy, put together my sales playbook, but I don't want to do all the system stuff. So can your team come in and do that too? Yes. So that's a completely different solution than the one that we originally thought we might discuss when we went into that conversation. But you won't uncover that until you get into the conversation and then you can present the solution. And I can tell you that having our team do all the strategy and set up the systems it costs more. The investment is greater than just doing the intensive, whether you did half day or all day, right? So you go into these conversations and it may look one way. However, being flexible to say, okay, well, I know we originally thought we were going to talk about this. However, I think this might be a better solution based on a number of factors, things that they share. They may say, I don't want to do that, or I don't want to do it in that way. That we often sometimes, well, let's see, because I said often and sometimes, it's not often, but sometimes even when the sales teams are doing sales support for client enrollment events, we obviously, there's an invitation that the host will make from stage, right? And we'll have conversations with people and they're like, I don't want that. I know that this is my person and I want to work with them, but not in this way. How else might we be able to achieve that? And then, we just share whatever the options are. Sometimes we know, sometimes we're like, I don't know, let me get back to you, right? So it really just depends, but I want you to not feel so like you have to be so rigid in that, right? So there is that we want to know what we're going to say. That's why we have the guide, but the guide allows us the fluidity to adjust the conversation based on who it is we're talking to at that moment. And we also have a way of then discovery, right, during the conversation to see is the original solution I had in mind coming into this conversation still the right solution now that I have more information. So that's really important to understand that. I totally encourage you to go ahead and grab your copy of the Courage Diary because it just has a lot of great resources in it as well. So the last thing I want to touch on in today's episode, because I know this has already been a lot. I'm just grabbing my books. I want to make sure I read these definitions correctly. Part of what you would map out in your conversation guide is what I call clarifying questions, but industry language is overcoming objections. And I want to ask you this particular question, and then I'm going to get into definitions and my reasoning why. But I want to ask you this question. What if there was no such thing as overcoming objections? Because this is a reason of why. So let me tell you. One of the reasons why I often hear that people don't want to do sales conversations or go in to have sales conversations is because they don't want to get to that part. They know that I go into the sales conversation, I ask questions, I get to know this person, and I share solutions, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And in earlier episodes, I've talked about, dealing with rejection and what that process looks like. You hear the word no and all those kinds of things, right? But part of that too is not only just the no, but when you're taught to overcome objections and the energy that comes with. So in that, like I said, I want to get my definitions right. Definitions, girl. Is so overcome is defined as succeed in dealing with a problem or difficulty. It's also overpower or overwhelm, or it's also defined as defeat, as in defeat an opponent. That's overcome, right? It's already problematic, right? Objection is defined as an expression or feeling of disapproval or opposition. It's also defined as a reason for disagreeing or the action of challenging or disagreeing with something. So when you think about it, you're having a conversation with someone who's interested in working with you, right? You're probably, hopefully, excited to work with them. But in the back of your mind, you're like, at some point during this conversation, in order for us to work together, I have to be successful in overpowering or overwhelming this particular person because they're challenging or disagreeing with me. Energetically, that just doesn't feel right, right? Like I'm going into this conversation and energetically, I feel that at some point, in order for us to be able to work together, I have to somehow overpower and defeat you. Like it's not now just a conversation, but it's almost like I'm going into battle. And when, depending on your personality, like mine, I'm like, I'm tired. I don't want to go into battle. I just want to talk to you and see, are we a good fit to work together? So one of the things that part of the work that I get to do with clients is shifting that. So that's why we say, no. What if there is no such thing as overcoming objections? Now, that's not to say that prospects won't have questions, which is why that part of the conversation, which would normally be called overcoming objections, we redefine as clarifying questions. People have questions all the time, but that doesn't mean that I have to defeat them, overpower them, or somehow exert them and bully them into my will, right? Like that's not how that works. We're coming into this conversation as equals, but that doesn't mean they won't have questions. That doesn't mean they won't have legitimate questions, right? And so when you know what those questions are, hence practice, right? Some of those you may guess as you have more conversations. You now know what those are. Sometimes you address them in the, before you even get to that part of the conversation. Other times you just answer them, right? When you know what those are, you just add them to your conversation guide. Here's how I respond, right? But it shifts the energy of it because now I'm not coming in trying to defeat you. I'm coming in to answer any questions or all the questions that I can answer so that you as the buyer, right, can make an informed decision, whether it's yay or nay, right? And so I think that's really important as you're looking at sales and sales conversations and how to do it, is also the energetics behind it. Because once we address the no and the fear of rejection, usually dealing with objections is the next one. It's like, well, I don't want to do this and I don't want to have to do that. And you don't have to. You can structure your sales conversations in such a way that you respect the buyers, the prospects, you respect their decision-making process, and you respect that they have the ability to make an informed decision. Your job is to provide them with the tools and the resources and the information to make said decision. Hopefully, if it's a good fit, they choose you and your organization or your team to work together. But ultimately, that's not your job, right? Your job is not to beat them into submission. Your job is to present them with the information, to be a solution provider, to answer their questions, to build rapport and relationship, and of course, to follow up when necessary. And understanding that and making those small tweaks, no scripts, conversation guides, really understanding that you have to sell yourself first and your belief, because your belief and your excitement is contagious. You can't help yourself, right? Knowing exactly what to say. If you need to, write it out. I've done that for clients. I write it for them. And each one is different. Even though we may have a framework, each client is different. Each offer is different. Audiences are different. How they talk, their language is different. So no, they're not going to all be the same. And then really shifting the energy and understanding that there doesn't have to be, unless you want it to be, any such thing in your sales conversations as overcoming objections. You simply get to answer questions and provide additional clarity, because it's super clear to you. This is what you do all the time, but it's not as clear to your prospects. And sometimes we have to back it up, slow it down. Nadia, definitely Nadia, right? So that they can better understand. They can really tap into that excitement. They pick up that excitement and energy from us. And it's an actual pleasant experience. And a big part of this is listening, really paying attention, listening, being able, like I said, to flow with the person that's in front of us. And that is the difference maker. Once you start going out there and having conversations and having fun with it and really being present, you then you present the opportunity for your buyers and prospects to have a completely different sales experience than they may have had in the past. And that is so stinking cool. All right, so I know we cover a ton of different resources. We'll make sure all of those things are linked in the show notes, but I want you to get out there, have those conversations, track them in your courage diary, celebrate every single time that you have the courage to get on a sales call, present a solution, and ask for the sale. Whether or not they say yay or nay, the more times you do it, that increases the likelihood of you getting to those yeses. So stay in it, don't opt out. And remember, your job is to get them to a yay or a nay. Don't leave them on the fence, right? But you can't make people buy from you until they are ready to move forward. We can influence, but we can't force people to buy from us until they're ready. Okay. All right. So if you like this episode, you enjoyed it, please go like us, rate us on Apple Podcasts, share this with a friend. And if you have questions, follow-up questions, input, all of that great stuff, be sure to email us at askdrnadia@thedoyenagency.com. Ask Dr. Nadia at thedoyenagency.com. And if you want me to answer the question in a future episode, just let us know and I will be sure to do that. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of Straight Talk About Sales. I'll see you again real soon.